So I got two massive figures in Boston sports history to give the eulogy for right now. And the first one we're going to talk about is the middleweight boxer, Marvelous Hagler, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, who mostly like this. The guy's first name was Marvin Hagler, and we went by Marvelous, right? He didn't get respected enough, and so a reporter did not call him Marvelous afterwards, and he legally went and changed his name to Marvelous Marvin Hagler. So that is how he will be remembered forever, hopefully, by his actual name. And so his story is just fascinating. Grew up in a rough part of Newark, New Jersey, moved to Brockton, Mass. To get into boxing. And he came up the hard way as a boxer, going through all these scraps in the New England region to try and one day get a shot at being a professional boxer where he could make a serious chunk of money. So at his era of the fighting in the late 70s and through the late 80s, was the number one middleweight boxer was Sugar Ray Leonard, and he had a much more charismatic lifestyle. When Hagler had first really thought about considering to turn pro, he had basically one of two options: either try to train for the Olympics and go the Sugar Ray Leonard route, or just grind it out in the minor areas of boxing to try to make some money, get a name, and eventually get enough reputation to get a title shot, right? Well, Leonard took the very, very scenic route by going to the Olympics, getting famous, right? Becoming like a whole household name. While Hagler just grinded, and it built a fire inside of him that few boxers could ever muster, because a lot of times you get a chip on your shoulder as a boxer, right? Because too small, too skinny, too slow. But the chip was very real with him in this aspect. He wanted to prove that he was legit, and he spent the rest of his boxing career trying to prove that he was the best middleweight in the entire country. And so his all-time record is just absolutely nuts. I mean, he fought 67 times over 14 years as a pro. This is from the Associated Press story, if any of you are interested in doing that. And he went 62, 3, and 2 with 52 knockouts. What a guy, right? Southpaw, absolute legend, with his bald head glistening in the lights, and he was just a dominant boxer. And I love this quote that Associated Press put in here. "If they cut my bald head open, they will find one big boxing glove," Hagler said. "That's all I am. I live it." And he was the man in Boston during this time. People loved him. He was in the 80s, Moles, it was a huge deal when Hagler was fighting, especially towards the end when he got a title shot that he would hold for quite some time in 1985 when he went against Tommy Hearns. And, well, spring of 85 at Caesars Palace in Vegas. If you want to go watch boxing excellence, these guys in the first round are just throwing haymakers at each other. Just absolute bombs. They were refusing to give an edge. And he was bleeding at one point, and eventually he got the knockout and he got the dub. And then so a couple years later, he was able to fight, finally, after all these years, Sugar Ray Leonard. And there was a lot of controversy around this leading up to it as well. Like, Hagler said he was ducking him for years, and then Leonard finally agreed to fight him. And it was just a really, really controversial boxing bout that they still talk about today. It was being controversial in the sense that who really won. There was a wild judge score. Unfortunately, Hagler came out on the losing end of that one. When some people will argue that he won, and if people don't, they're at least arguing that it was a lot closer than one of the judges ranked. So after that, he was incredibly bitter, and it was a very sad end to his boxing career, because he didn't really fight after that. Like, he was just gone. And boxers do not ever go out on top of that, Moles. Like, they come back when they're out of shape and try to grind through and get that extra paycheck. And Hagler was done. He was bitter. He was gone. After training all those times in the Cape, running with boots and just working out like straight up Rocky, in the sweatsuits, he was gone. Retired, and he went to Italy to shoot some movies, then came back into New Hampshire, and then he died last Saturday at 66. And it was a sad one, because I heard some of the old, so about a generation and a half or 2 generations ago of Boston fans, it was a massive deal when he was fighting, and they loved his attitude. He was right up there with the Patriots, Bruins, Red Sox, and Celtics. One guy said he was basically the 5th team when it was a Hagler fight in the 80s, and it was incredible. And so as someone who wasn't that into boxing, I'd certainly heard his story, and then I was watching a Sports Century, which was very good last week, and reading some things about him, just that he had the heart of a lion, and he represented exactly what Boston wants in their athlete, right? And no, he will be missed, and it was sad how his career ended with the loss to Sugar Ray, and he never really came back in the ring after that. So rest in peace to Marvin Hagler, and he was just a Boston icon that will always be remembered. And there's only a few boxing icons really that you could talk about, and especially in Boston with Rocky Marciano, Mickey Ward, and Hagler. And he might have been the best of those three men. He was just an absolute warrior. And so now going to another incredibly inspirational story. I mean, I am seriously honored to give this talk right now about the legend that is Dick Hoyt. And better known as Rick and Dick Team Hoyt, were a marathon father and son combination that did Ironmans together, and it was just incredible. Their story is just surreal. So Rick came into this world when he was born, unfortunately with the umbilical cord suffocating him for the first few minutes, and he was paralyzed and unable to walk at all, right? There was thoughts of maybe they should send him to an institution. It's like, your son's going to be a vegetable the rest of his life is what they said. And he's like, man, we're going to have to do something to get him to lead somewhat of a normal life. So they were able to find the technology in the 70s molds to get him to be able to speak through like a computer. And I want you to guess what his first sentence was. As a New Englander, what do you think you first said?
I don't know whether to be really sentimental here or really cliche Boston. How old was he when he got the...
I don't know the exact year, but it was during a good stretch of play for the Boston hockey team, and he said, "Go Bruins," was the first mention.
Really?
His parents were thinking, like, is he gonna talk about like his dad? He's gonna say like, "I love you, Mom. I love you, Dad." Nah, it was all about Bobby Orr and the Big Bad Bruins going for the cup. He's "Go Bruins." It's like, let's go, New Englander through and through. And so in 1977, this is from the Triathlon, the magazine, or through Canada, through all these great runners. That in 1977, he was able to speak and tell his dad, like, I want to be involved in this charity run. And his dad was a little out of shape, and he's, oh, that's great. Let's get a little father and son combination. So he put his son in a wheelchair and did the race, and he was just hooked, absolutely hooked from the start. And so then Rick and Dick Hoyt started to really get involved in these competitions all across New England, and they became staples of the Boston Marathon and of multiple Ironmans. And I don't know if you know what an Ironman is, Bolts, but swimming 2.5 miles, biking over 100 miles, and running a marathon.
In how long?
It takes like a full day, basically, for these people to do it.
You have to do that in one day?
That's a good question. Look that up. How long was their best Ironman? Let's see. Ironman, Rick and Dick Hoyt.
How long is the average?
Yeah, because and he pushed his son in the wheelchair when they were doing the biking.
The average of what?
What's the average?
According to RunTry.com, and this is from 2011, the average Ironman time takes 12.5 hours.
Yeah, so he would pull his son in a little boat, right? And Dick would swim with Rick, just hanging out in the back. He would swim over 2 miles with it. I believe it was like 3.5 miles for Ironman, something like that, a couple miles.
Yeah.
Then they would go over 100 miles on a bike with him strapped in front, going forward, and also run with him also in a wheelchair pushing him forward. And they ran multiple Boston marathons. They ran one Boston marathon in like 2 hours and 40 minutes. Like, that's just crazy to think that he's pushing him forward, and he's still going faster than you and me, like, if we both took a break and ran 13.1 miles ourselves. It's crazy.
That's nuts.
And so, and there's a couple of just phenomenal quotes that I want you to read, or that I wanted to read during one of these like documentaries that talked about the father-son relationship, and it's just phenomenal that Rick said that when he was running, he felt like his disability disappeared, and he sensed his feeling of being able to contribute and being a part of a team athletic achievement. And so Dick, being the humble man that he is, gives Rick all the credit, right? Because Rick is the one competing, and I'm just loaning him my arms and legs so he can go. And Rick would also say that if he was able to walk and be out of his wheelchair, and his dad was thinking like, oh, like, would you go into baseball? Would you go into hockey? Like, which sport would you do? And he's, the first thing I would do, Dad, is I'd put you in the wheelchair, then push you. And so they became absolute legends in the city. Team Hoyt was still very much known throughout all these parts of New England. They're a huge connection into Boston and to the marathon that they ran so many. It's just incredible what they were able to do with this disability that Rick had, and they pushed through, and they continue to inspire people all over the world that had similar situations, because there wasn't anything happening like this before. And the fact that they were able to run multiple Boston marathons together for, I believe it was like 32 marathons that the guy ran with his son in front of him, and like you said, he was doing the pushing, right? 32 Boston marathons, and so they did. The last one was in 2014, which is crazy considering that was the last one they did was after the marathon bombing. I mean, if you're gonna go out in style, man, go out with that one where the cheers are always just blasting through Boylston when they turn that corner. And he's one of the most important figures in Boston sports history, because I don't think you could really do anything more impressive than what Dick Hoyt did from a father standpoint of just being so committed to helping your son try to live the best life he can, and also with the sheer athleticism of pushing a guy 26.2 miles and still running it in under 3 hours. It's just absolutely, it's crazy with it.
That is unfathomable.
Isn't it? It's just phenomenal. So I can't stress enough how important they were to the city and how much they represented the community. And I'll close with this. I really hope I'm doing them justice, because they were just an amazing part of this entire region. And it's so fitting that their last run was in 2014. They were stopped a couple miles before the marathon finish line in 2013, so they were not impacted by the blast or anything, thank God. And so they were able to come back and they did the last one in 2014. And then when Dick retired from running, they were able to have someone else push Rick through the other few marathon running. So we'll see who gets to carry him going forward, or if Rick retires, we shall see. Really looking forward to learning how that pans out. But I was thinking about this earlier, and it's crazy how much the marathon now means after the bombing of 2013, and how much the city really rallies behind it, and how much it impacts not only our lives on Patriots Day and the third Monday of April, but during any time there's a sporting event, how much they're connected to it, and how the three people's lives are not forgotten. But Dick Hoyt was Boston strong before we even knew that there was such a term. And
damn right.
He was an incredible person, and when he's right up there in the iconic status of these other great Boston figures, because he just wanted to be a part of his son's life in a positive way. And how can that just not put a smile on your face, saying, like, I'm not going to give up, and my son wants to do this. He's going to be a part of the community, and he's going to feel what it's like to be a part of an athletic achievement. And it puts a smile on your face.
There is nothing more beautiful in this world, nothing more beautiful in this world than a parent who would do anything to give the life they want for their son or daughter. Nothing.
Yeah. So Dick Hoyt, unfortunately, he was 80 and he passed away earlier this week on Wednesday, and it was a sad moment, because as someone who's clearly not involved in like the running community, if you ever see me on campus, right? But man, that was one of the first people like I really started to hear about in Boston of making an impact. When I was like looking at like books about who to pay attention to in Boston, was the story of Rick and Dick Hoyt. And rest in peace, Dick, because you made a legacy that will stand forever. And anytime anybody ever crosses the finish line, they have to be thinking about what you did and the amazing memories you created, and just building up the marathon into a real community aspect. And it's sad that he's gone, but his legacy will not be forgotten, Molt.